got in trouble recently for doing over 130.
Yeah. Yep. Little king of wild card, man. So, all right. So, all right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Consistency Podcast. I'm your host Andre Robinson, and joining me is my co-host Frank FLW. For those who don't know, we're happy to be back with you guys. No guests this week, but we have a bunch of great topics that we want to touch on. A lot of them are directly related to hip hop, some are more related to just society, but please join us for the conversation down in the comments below. So first, Frank, how you been since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm really grateful for our recent guest, and I hope that those people who didn't get a chance to watch the last two conversations will go back and go to We the Source and check those out. Definitely check those out. But yeah, I'm doing as good as one can considering all that is going on in the world. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the world. We gonna keep it to the small world of hip hop first, before we get all into the the greater dealings. Or we probably won't touch on that this episode. But there's a lot going on. Stay educated on everything that's going on. Stay informed and do your best to survive out here. So, first thing I did want to discuss, I know it's been a couple of, it's kind of more relating to our previous guest when we were talking about sports betting. We were going to touch on it during that episode, but it was so jam packed with information, we didn't really have time to discuss current events. A couple of weeks ago, there was an altercation between two well known rappers, Offset and Lil Tjay, at a casino, and it seemed to have been over some gambling debts, and it resulted in the rapper Offset being shot. Alleged, I don't believe it was by Lil Tjay specifically, but maybe somebody in his camp. So I really don't have all of the details about that situation, but I think the situation as a whole kind of ties back into some of what we've talked about previously on this channel in terms of some of the dangers of gambling, betting, using high stakes of money. And so we just kind of wanted to touch on that really quickly since it's a topic that we've covered before. So did you hear about this, Frank?
So I heard about it, I think the day that it occurred,
Mm-hmm.
but the only thing I heard was that Offset had been shot, and I didn't know any of the details. So it wasn't until I communicated with you that I learned some of the details around it. And you know, I wonder how many people that we know in larger society, even famous people like Offset, have been offset because of a gambling debt. We, we'll never know. But as it was discussed last week, gambling in our society has reached epidemic proportions. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a brother a day or two ago, and I was just kind of feeling him out as someone who might come on the show. And I was asking him, he's a former athlete and very much involved in sports, and asked his opinion on sports gambling in general, whether he had a strong opinion one way or another. And he really didn't express a strong opinion, just that he himself doesn't get involved, but he knows several people that he would put in that category as sports gambling addicted.
Mm.
So it's interesting.
So, just for the audience, a little bit more context on Offset. Offset is one of the three Migos. So, from the Migos group, who had the song "Bad and Bougie" a couple of years ago. There's only two of them who are still living. Unfortunately, Takeoff was killed a few years ago in Houston, Texas, I believe. Got shot in the head. So there's just it just kind of lending some of the violence that's been around this group, not necessarily even because of the type of lyrics that they're talking about, but we're more talking about the lifestyle, like we mentioned in the Young Thug and Rich Homie Quan video a couple of months ago. So has passed away. Quavo and Offset, who are the two remaining Migos who are still alive, aren't really on the same page and haven't made music together in quite some time now, because there was allegedly some infidelities between them and their girlfriends. I believe it's all alleged. I can't say it for a fact, but it just seemed that Offset was messing around with Quavo's at the time girlfriend. And also, a lot of people may know Offset as being Cardi B's husband, who they're actually currently going through a divorce. So, to me, Offset it's been a lot of things going on with Offset in general, just in his life because I know he took the Takeoff death pretty hard. He's going through a divorce. And his wife she got pregnant by another man while they were together. Although they were in the process of being divorced. It's a very messy situation, but I'm saying all of that to say, things have been kind of hectic in his life. And so, the situation between him and Lil Tjay kind of came up maybe a year ago, where Lil Tjay was saying that he had saw Offset struggling at the casino, and he had lent him $5,000 to $10,000. I want to say 10,000. I can't remember the number specifically. And that seems to be what had sparked the incident this past month. To where I guess they saw each other and he still hadn't paid the money back, and so it just led to an altercation. And that's one of the things that when you're gambling, I think that's something that a lot of people don't keep tabs on, is the amount of debt that they have to other people. So it's like, yeah, you may owe the casino, 100,000, and you may be able to bet and maybe win some of that back and pay off the casino. But the thing is, now you're not thinking of all the people who you borrow money from in order to, make yourself whole with that. So it's like there's debt that's on paper, and then there's the debt that you go to through your friends and family. So a lot of people, especially if you don't have a consistent income, which I would just put Offset in that category for right now, even though he did release an album. The problem is there's not as much. I think he's experienced a very big drop off in the amount of money he was seeing when the Migos were at their peak and to what he's making now. And so where this in the past might have been a debt that he would be able to clear easily, now with the income not coming in as fast, it's harder for him to clear that debt. And now the gambling almost becomes your actual form of income, depending on how much you're betting. And so that just can makes for a bad recipe with everything. And I think that that kind of is just the culmination of everything that's kind of been going on in Offset's life. Him leaving him in the hospital, he was still able to perform at a concert or an event. I forgot exactly which festival it was, but he was still able to perform all in his after getting shot in a wheelchair. But it's just like the quality of your life, like, you know, it's you see the spillover from the gambling addiction, and I'm not sure any other addictions that he has, and I'm also speculating that it's a actual gambling addiction, but from the outside looking in, that's what it seems to be.
So there's a couple of things. Uh, First of all, I wonder how much how much drugs could also play into whether or not one remembers, because oftentimes, the book calls all of this vices,
Right.
and usually these vices go together.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if, in whatever that environment was in which he was given the loan, could he been impaired to a point where he's got all these things going on at once? Because again, we're talking about people who are used to dealing with large amounts of cash and going through it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so there's no telling whether or not he even remembered that he had gotten that amount of money from this guy. He might have, or he might not have. You know,
Yeah.
it just depends on what state he was in when he received it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But I do want you to talk a little bit about. Well, you made a statement about Offset and Quavo not necessarily being on the same page for
Mm-hmm.
good reason. If the allegations are true about Offset um, getting with his buddy's lady, I don't know if you changed your mind about talking about it, but I do think it's fitting because I do know that Gucci has been very out in the open about discussing his bouts with mental illness and overcoming it, and his efforts to kind of turn the corner on who he was and who he is now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some pushback on that. And I think a few weeks ago you were thinking about addressing that,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth, in light of what we're talking about now, I think it would be important to talk about it in the sense that one of the challenges I think that people who, particularly in hip hop, we could say the same to a lesser extent with people in rock and roll and pop, but particularly with hip hop, the street often gives them a hard time when they try to let go of the street as such, you know,
Mm-hmm.
unless they make a hard pivot into business the way that someone like Master P did. And Master P was always paving his own way anyway, so he wasn't beholden to somebody else's record company. So he kind of had the leverage to pivot the way that he did.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's important. I think it was I think it was Jadakiss that I sent you a clip from, that he was talking about. It could have been somebody else. A few weeks ago, I sent you a clip. He was being interviewed and he was talking about how important his piece is to him now and not chasing the bag, which, again, if you think about the anthem of early 2000 1990s hip hop, it was all about chasing the bag. So now we've got this rapper who's now talking about he's no longer chasing the bag. So can you kind of talk a little bit about Gucci and whatever pivot he's made, and you know whether or not how much freedom these guys have to change and pivot?
Yeah, so just for a little context for the audience, couple of weeks ago now, Gucci. Well, I don't know, the actual police report was filed a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure exactly when this situation happened, but Gucci has a record label called 1017 Brick Squad, and to that he had a rapper named Pooh Shiesty signed to his record label, who was previously incarcerated and is now back in jail because of the situation that occurred between him and Gucci. So Pooh Shiesty was a very big artist, but right before he went in, he was one of the hot upcoming artists. Um, he had songs with Lil Durk that was very big, and the song, his biggest song right now is "Back in Blood" featuring Lil Durk, and so he went to jail for a while. Then when he got out, he did a first day out freestyle, which is that's what Gucci's really been known for, because he did a first day out when he got out of jail as well, or when he got out of prison. So that's almost become a tradition for artists who've been incarcerated to come out and give their their first day out, like the update of, okay, this is what we about to be on, you know what I mean, about to take over, this, that, and the third. So once I think he got out, I think that record was doing pretty good, and this is all speculation at this point, but I'm thinking that with Pooh Shiesty being signed to 1017 and the song doing as well as it did, I believe he was probably anticipating more back end money than he was receiving, probably from that song doing so well. And probably when he didn't see it, he wanted to meet with Gucci and get out of his contract. And anyone knows it's not that simple to just get out of your rap contract at all, especially if you don't have the funds to pay for what would get you out of that. And I think a lot of people don't understand what being signed to a label means, and so some people have the thought that, oh, Pooh Shiesty has enough to buy himself out of that contract, but you don't know how much he was signed for. You don't know how much he owes. So there's just so much that's not known about the record business part of it that I think it gives people a different perspective, because so many people think any rapper has millions, and that's flat out not the case. For one, a
Most
lot
of
of
them
them,
don't.
most
Most
of
of
them
them
don't
don't.
at all. What happens is a rapper like Pooh Shiesty may have gotten an album advance, so that means that he's paid. He's given the money to then create the album. So that's what happens with a lot of artists. So if you sign to a record deal, and not many rappers are getting signed to $1 million deals, for one. So say he got signed, we'll just do a round number, 500,000. So if he had an advance for 500,000, he would be paid that up front, but then it's his responsibility to use that money in order to create his album or the product that he wants to then sell. And so once you pay for that, that's all of the money that you're getting paid from by the label until you pay them back, and then you'll start to receive your royalties, or however your contract is structured. So in order for Pooh Shiesty to be made whole with his current contract, he would have to, and this is just in the situation where we're using $500,000 as the advance. His record would have to make, or he would even that's where the term 360 deals come in. So like where you say rappers They may be going on into a concert. They may do shows and get paid for shows, but that's also part that's getting paid back towards their advance. And so they have to use all of this money to pay. So they have to pay taxes on this money. They have to pay their agents. They have to pay their crew. So although you're hearing them getting $500,000, that $500,000 doesn't go to one person. That goes to that rapper's business or their entity, kind of. So we're already off in terms of thinking that, okay, well, he has $500,000. No, he doesn't. He might be able to keep 100,000 of that 500,000 to himself. Everything else pretty much has a place to go, and he still has to use that money to then create his album as well. So there's so much that goes into that concept of being signed to a major record label. So
And if we consider that he might be left with 100,000, going back to the beginning of our conversation, somehow because people have this perception of how much money a rapper has, in part because of what they say in their rap,
mm-hmm,
he's got to use that 100,000 to help perpetuate this image.
exactly.
So he that 100,000 goes up in smoke immediately because when he goes to the club, there's an expectation that he's going to release X amount of dollars in the club,
Mm-hmm.
in the strip club. And I wanted to say this because we talked about this on the Consistency podcast before. It's been alleged that the unaliving of both Tupac and Biggie has a lot to do with the fact that allegedly the two of them were looking to form their own record label and totally revolutionize the industry. And to the point that you were making earlier, if that is true, then those people whose label they belong to, they weren't going to let their biggest acts just walk off.
Right.
And again, I wasn't there, but people who talked to these men and knew them sort of intimately have strongly suggested that there was not exactly what we were told was the reason for them expiring.
Yeah. So that, like you said, record labels don't want, because although they gave you 500,000, because you have to think of it from the record business side of things. So they're paying $500,000, and they want to recoup that. They're not trying to make that $500,000 back. They're trying to make $5 million off of that 500,000. So
Absolutely.
they're trying to make sure that their money is multiplying. So they'll pay the 500,000 in hopes to make 5 million off of your record. So when you try it, so you think that you can get off of the get out of the deal by paying that 500,000 back. That's not what they're looking for. They really be looking for 5 million for you to pay them back instead of that 500,000. So that's where a lot of people also don't understand that part of the business, because they're like, well, if you pay back the advance money, you should be good. But that's not always the case, because one, artists then do go over budget. So it's like you can get that 500,000, and then what the label does sometimes isn't even counted towards what they're doing. So a lot of the services that a major label will provide for you, they're charging that artist to do those services. So that may be getting them certain placements in editorials or publications, or getting them on blog sites, things like that. So there's a whole marketing budget on top of the advance money that they're getting, that a lot of artists don't even understand that they're tapping into by some of the things that they're doing. Sometimes they're given a credit card that they're able to use, and typically most of what artists spend that advance money on is the costume of being a rapper. And so that's where the chains come in, the cars. Some of them are smart enough to lease the cars. Some of them try and buy them outright because they think that that's their money. So there's a lot of things that it could be a whole separate video on mistakes that most rappers make when it comes to accepting an advance. But just to be clear, the real problem is once you're in for the 500,000, you owe much more than $500,000 if you want to get your rights back to things. Because what I think, what most artists do actually want is their masters, which is how you can generate future income from the recording of the music that you make. And that's what the record labels want to hold on to because they are trying to get residual income on that. And when they own the rights, what they do a lot of times is they're able to market that out, get it placed in movies or get it on commercials, and so to further monetize it. So there's a lot of artists who say you don't need your masters because you're not gonna do what some of the major labels are able to do with the masters. So that's one of the pros of being with a major label. So they say, it's better to have a percentage of $1 million than 100% of nothing. So that's why it's not to say that all record labels are bad. It's just a business that you need to understand in order for it to work best for you. And I think so many people go into it blind that it ends up not making sense to them for what they think was gonna happen. And that kind of leads back into the situation with Pooh Shiesty, because he didn't have the money to get out of the deal, so he tried to kind of strong arm his way out of the deal, which led to the incident. So they're saying allegedly him and a gang of his friends and another person who's signed to Gucci's record label Big 30 went up to meet with him somewhere in Texas, and then they kind of I don't know if it would be considered armed robbery, but they allegedly they had guns and forced Gucci to sign him out of his contract deal, which obviously, for any of those people who don't know, you can't sign a legally binding contract under duress, so that makes the contract null and void. So from it was a pretty much a washed situation from Pooh Shiesty's attempt. They were later there were other people in the office when they were trying to force Gucci to sign off the papers, and they ended up calling the cops. They also say that Gucci had security who was obligated to inform law enforcement as to what happened. There's also situations where Gucci had jewelry on, and in order to get an insurance claim, you need to actually file a police report for you to be made whole on your investment. So a lot of situations, there's a lot of reasons why the police got involved in this situation, and regardless of that, all of that came back on Gucci in terms of him being someone from the streets and it being against street code to get the police involved in a situation like this. And I believe that's what Pooh Shiesty was assuming would happen dealing with Gucci, that Gucci's not going to tell the police. But I mean, this is a completely different man than he was a couple of years ago. And so that's just led to a lot of discussion, because early on in Gucci's career, he was kind of he was a menace in that regard, to where, he put on like he was doing what Pooh Shiesty would do, and this is how he would handle the situation like this. So yeah, that's kind of where the conversation around the whole situation more shifted. Was okay, so now does this count as Gucci Mane being a snitch? Or that's where a lot of people's remarks are kind of hovering at.
But I think that perhaps people should see it as his evolution to get law enforcement involved, because if he had stayed in the mentality that he was famous for, this would have ended bad.
Yeah, I mean, people don't exactly know what they really want, honestly, because had it ended in a situation where, let's say, it was the old Gucci and and Pooh Shiesty ended up deceased because he retaliated, then people would have been R.I.P. Pooh Shiesty. So it's always a lose lose situation, which is why we encourage people to not get into that lifestyle in the first place, because really showing Gucci is showing that once you enter that life, it's not really as simple as just turning away from because of the past, and it's almost, I don't want to say karmic retribution, because I mean he did serve time in prison, but there's a lot of things that Gucci probably has gotten away with in his his career, his life. So it's not for us to say whether he deserves something or doesn't deserve something. Um, but for people who live that lifestyle, some people don't think you can ever get out of it, um, because of the way that you've done people, how people how you might have done somebody in the past, in a similar situation, and so now people are like, well, now you're getting soft, and it's like you do want to grow from it, but a lot of times we can't just. Sometimes people won't let you like wipe the slate completely clean in those instances, and it just, but in this situation, luckily he was able to leave with his life, because I mean he could have easily gotten killed in this situation, and then we would have been saying R.I.P. Gucci. So that's the decision Gucci now has to make, that he's older, but it doesn't, you can't get off scotch free, because it's like, okay, now you're either going to be known as, you can be RIP or you can be known as a snitch. And so now it's like, which one? And I think for him, it's much better to be known as a snitch, because you're no longer trying to associate with that street life anymore. But, for a lot of people, with that, you lose some fans who respected you for the real. And so, you have to balance that out. You can't have everything.
So I want you to talk a little bit about why we're in this vein. And I know uh, we got another hot topic that we're going to touch on a little bit. But I think it's important because you you always have those people who are looking to get into the music industry. And these days, people have heard a lot of things, and there's still some things that people don't really understand. And you talked about this a little bit on the podcast. What is it that Chance the Rapper is doing that's different? I know that he's kind of doing his own thing. And can you talk a little bit about that and how he may be changing the game a bit?
Um, so changing the game in terms of what he's doing now.
So my understanding is that Chance the Rapper, isn't he independent and kind of doing his own thing
Yeah, yeah, he's
as
independent.
an artist and
Mm-hmm.
not connected with a label, and uh, that's the part I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, independence has its own struggles, because you're doing everything by yourself. So if you do have some money and some, I think, I'm trying to think how to put this. independent, I think, is definitely the best route for people if you want to make money in the long term. You're not going to make the big bucks that you see Drake's and Kendrick's make, but that's probably the best way for you to make an actual living. Um, but it's difficult because you're responsible for everything that a major label would be doing. So that means that you have to make sure that you're getting in front of all the publications. You have to make sure that you're advertising your music. So it's a lot more work, but you keep like like I said before, you can have a small percentage of $1 million or 100% of whatever you make it. And so I think in today's era where it's so much streaming and not as much physical CD copies sales, it's a little bit more difficult for independent artists to recoup immediately. They A lot of them do their recoups by doing shows and concerts. Um, but yeah, in terms of streaming, that's where things get a little crazy because one thing people forget about streaming too is you only get paid for a stream one time. So it's like you could have had billions of streams, but you've already been paid for those. So it's not like once you hit a billion streams, it's not like you then get $1 million. It's like no, you've been getting with every couple of streams come in, you get a couple of dollars. Every couple of streams, you get a couple more. So throughout that whole time it took you to get to a billion streams, you've been paid out a couple of times, and maybe it's not none of it's been life changing money, but it's been enough for you to survive off of. So I think it's the way people can sustain themselves as an independent artist has changed a little bit, especially if you're not touring. So chance of someone who tours, I'm pretty sure he toured this last album. I'm not sure if it's completed yet or not. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of artists who try to do the independent route. I don't know if you've heard of the artist or La Russell. You heard of him?
What's the name?
La Russell.
Uh, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, he's an independent artist from California. He's been under fire a lot just because he recently done like a management deal with Rock Nation. So people were like, "Oh, you're not truly independent," and that's not true. But he's had his own struggles. He's put a lot of his own money into it, and he's actually he was doing one of those pay what you want campaigns. So it's like, and then he has some celebrities like Kyrie Irving had purchased the album for like $10,000, something like things like that. So people get creative, but sustainability becomes difficult as an independent artist because you have the freedom to release a lot more music and much more creative freedom. So you don't have to get your projects approved by anybody, but ultimately it's still a very tough road to go. I couldn't tell you which one is better, honestly.
That's what I was getting ready to ask you. For those people who are watching, what would you, which direction should a person go? Because it is challenging. I think about the artist that was Princeton, formerly known as Princeton Prince, and then after Prince finally got his name back, allegedly he OD'd on some drugs that people that were close to him said he didn't even mess with any
Hmm.
kind of drugs.
Yeah.
So and then Mr. Jive, who threw a party after his number one artist passed away, it comes out after the fact that she was looking around and thinking like, wow, I was the top selling artist in the world, but the paper trail is not supporting that in my direction. And so when she started asking certain questions, next thing we knew, she they said she took a bath that didn't work out. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it's I would say without without you know having studied it in the way that you have, but been an observer for many years and been connected in other ways, that people really have to get in touch with their source and make the right decision for them. Because, like you're saying, on the one hand, you got these people that got hooked up with the record companies, and some of them, for some of them, it has worked out.
Mm-hmm.
But then for so many others, not so much so. You know, so
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult. It depends on what you're looking for, honestly. If you want to look like a rapper, then most likely you'll need to sign with a major label in order to do that. If you want to make a career off of rapping, and you want to have and you care about the art and creative control, then independent would probably be the better route. But you will not be. It's not gonna be the same. You're not gonna be Drake. You're not gonna be Kendrick, J. Cole, any of them. And I was actually thinking of this recently. Have you heard of the term being a plant in the industry, like an industry plant?
yeah,
But to me, all that is I think once any artist gets a PR team, then they become a plant, because the PR team is the one who's giving you the creative direction, how the media is perceiving you. They're setting you up with all of the blog sites, publications, getting you in front of the people who you need to know. So I think any major artist would fit the um, qualifications of being a plant. And to me, that it makes the most sense, because these some people are signed to very big PR firms who, they have other connections to, in some cases, government. So you never know what your initiative is dealing with some of these bigger PR firms. And so you see, oh, it's like, oh, this artist got signed, and then now they're they're pro this or anti this. And so, but that may just be more part of their marketing plan. And so if you're independent, even an independent artist can get a PR team and then become a plant. So that's because when you hear people talk about the artist I was mentioning before, La Russell, I think he just had an actual PR team. He purchased a PR team on his own, or started working with people who were in PR. And then when he started getting certain publications, people were accusing him of being plants. And I'm like, no, that's really just PR. That's just public relations right there. And public relations is all stemmed from propaganda. So that's where we understand that you are technically being manipulated to like this artist more than you typically would. And that's really just all that's all that it comes down to. So
and I can think of some artists from back in the day that they had some heck hectified PR because
yeah,
yeah,
it's a lot. So with I think we kind of did we finish the Gucci topic? I guess we touched on all of that. I feel like we kind of jumped all over the place. We started off Offset with that situation. I think we talked enough about that.
yeah. You responded to the Gucci question. So I got one more question before we move on. And I realize this question, we're just going to touch on it, but it really warrants its own show. And I'm sure we both have heard shows dedicated to this topic. Of course, with the rise of AI, I know at least two people who write songs and so forth who have used AI to do the singing for them,
Hmm.
and they put out their own music. And so how is all of that changing the game and will change the game?
Hey, I think it's kind of. I'm of the thought that it's like excuse me, like when auto tune kind of came in. It was looked at as a tool. Some artists abused it. Some people, it had a nice complement to what they already had going on. But to me, technology is technology. I think with Kanye West's last most recent album, um, he'd originally dropped it with the help of AI. I'm not sure exactly how much or if it was all AI. But then when he re-released it, he took out all of the AI. Supposedly, I can't confirm if that's all true, but yeah, I see. I think really they're using it to help these artists, write songs for sure. I know regular artists are using AI to help them write their songs now because it's just becomes the tool. It doesn't necessarily help if it's believable. There's actually people who it's just full AI blown artists, so it's not even a real person anymore. It's just an avatar, and then they give it a voice, and so now they're a whole recording artist just with the use of AI. And for some people are writing the songs themselves and then giving it to an AI to sing. Some people are having AI create the song and then singing it themselves. So there's so many different ways that you're able to utilize it. Some people have AI make the beat that that they want to rap on or sing on. So it's gonna be used in some capacity, some more by others. So it's I mean, some of it's good music. I feel like I can kind of tell when it's in AI, like especially when it comes to R&B, because I think R&B is a little bit more personal, and so you can kind of hear that that's not somebody's real experience all the time. So I think it's
You mean with the writing itself?
yeah, with the right, like, yeah, because they can just make a classic R&B song or something, and have an AI sing it. But like I said, some people are writing it from their own experience and they can't sing themselves, so they have an AI perform the song. But even then, that's when sometimes it feels like something's missing in the song, or it's not as authentic as it could be. So yeah, when it comes to it, uh, people can get creative. I mean, I know there can be some amazing music created because of AI as well. So I'm not necessarily against it. You just have to, some people will get lazy and completely AI it out. They'll have it create the lyrics, sing the song, and market it themselves. So it's just like when you get to that point, then yeah, but it's still the use of AI takes some skill too, or you need to know the right questions to ask. So it's not just saying that it's completely devoid of creativity, um, but it's gonna just continue to advance, and we'll see how people react to it. If it starts to catch on, then record labels are gonna be like, well, we can just do this. So but I still think there's always gonna be room for that human sound. That's also that goes back to the authenticity. Like when people saw what Pooh Shiesty was doing, they were like, "Oh, this music is now even more relatable." They was like, "It's even more authentic because we know that he really does it." So, it may lead to more violence in music. We really don't know what the outcome is gonna be. So it's anyone's guess.
I think that one of the big winners in all of this will be, when you think of genres of music, definitely gospel, because for the most part, gospel artists have almost always had to perform
Mm-hmm.
in order to have have the kind of success that secular artists would have, just because a lot of them didn't have the big labels, or they didn't have the platform,
Mm-hmm.
and so for them it will be business as usual, because even now a lot of artists are being forced, in part because of what you talked about earlier with the streaming. A lot of the artists are being forced to get on the road if they want to make some money. But
Mm-hmm.
gospel artists, they've been on the road. I mean, because that was the only way that they could be legitimate. Now you got a few of them like Lecrae and Kirk Franklin that maybe making decent money without the heavy touring, but even them, they go on tour and all that kind of stuff. Kirk Franklin for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and I have heard some step. I don't know if it's because of AI, but we've definitely heard um, the gospel music step up in terms of being more modern. So you definitely, it's harder to distinguish. Like you can hear a gospel song and it'd be very difficult to distinguish it until you realize the actual content that it's a gospel song. So
yeah,
some people love that, some people hate that. So it's once again, it's hard. It's kind of on whoever's listening or whoever's consuming it to decide whether it's a good or bad thing, because some people despise that it's sounding more like the secular music. But I mean, you gotta let people listen to what it is that they enjoy. um it's really difficult to say what now does define it as as a gospel song. I remember when we had Sean on, he was saying some people say 808s themselves is not supposed to be in gospel music. But I don't know if there's a gospel, a handbook on how to write gospel. Like, I think a lot of that is just preference and not necessarily law. So I don't know the whole rules of it. So if anyone does know, leave it in the comments and let us know, because we don't we don't know the
good luck
laws
for
of
those
that.
people who know all the laws. Yeah, it's a preference. It's definitely a preference thing.
For sure. Okay, you wanna get
Yeah, I'll
into
let
our.
you take the lead. People have been wondering about this lady on the screen all
Oh,
along.
she's not on the screen for them to see. Not yet.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's just for us. But I will. Hold on. Let me know if does this sound doubled for you.
Oh,
It's
it's
not
not
doubled.
double.
Okay, cool.
Nope.
It's doubled in my ears, but hold on. Hold on. Sorry, hold on. Okay, I gotta share it. So now it should be good. Can I speed it up? I don't know if I can speed it up on here. Okay, well, hold on 1 second, because it's not picking up on the volume isn't picking up on the. Oh wait, maybe it is. Oh no, it was silenced. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Your camera disappeared for a second. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, let me just make sure that this is being recorded.
Speaking.
Okay.
A good woman was someone who came from a good family. She was well educated. She could speak multiple languages. She could read. She could write. She could draw. She could sing. She went to charm school, right? She was well versed in social etiquette. That was a good woman. Her primary role was providing status to her husband from her origin of birth. As history progressed and we got to the industrial era, good woman became a domestic manager. She cleaned, she raised children, while men worked in factories. The woman would maintain the home and manage the children. Then there was World War II. Here comes the Rosie the Riveter propaganda. To help support the war efforts while the men were away, the women joined the workforce. Industrial production literally depended on female labor during World War II. Then post-war comes. The men come back. Women are asked to go back to the household. Soldiers needed jobs. Women were pushed out of the labor force and back into domestic roles. Mind you, all this before women even had bank accounts. Then here comes the 1980s. Women are working full-time and doing all of the domestic labor. They're girl bossing it up because the economy requires a dual income. But domestic expectations for women don't shift to men. Now we are still living in that world where women are expected to do it all. Women's roles throughout history have always been elastic. It expands, it contracts, it reshapes itself to meet the economic needs. Society asks women to be whatever the economy needs at the moment, then moralizes that role as a good woman. Men's roles, by contrast, stay stagnant. The definition of a good man hasn't changed. Men are providers and protectors. Men have never been asked to change. Society has never asked men to be anything else. Their labor has always been their primary value to society. Their identity has...
Hold on, I just wanted to stop it right there because it's a long. That was like about halfway through. So real quick, just based off of that, what were some of your thoughts? So this was a video that was my younger sister sent it to me, and then we had discussed it at a dinner at my parents' house. So my parents had their perspective on it. So I wanted to get your perspective on it, see what your thoughts were, and I'll share mine a little bit.
Yeah. So the premise of this video is what is a good woman? Well, first of all, this was a really good video for you to share with our audience because, again, one of the main things that we're endeavoring to do is to facilitate conversation, and conversation that is not about the same old things that people will often talk about. So I applaud the sister for stepping out there and talking about something that matters. First of all, I think that she raises some very pertinent points. But for me, at least when I think about Black men in particular, because her thesis, in my opinion, primarily describes middle to upper class white people in our society. If you go back and listen to her thesis and how she's breaking down the time periods and so forth, she was not necessarily talking about a Black existence. Mm-hmm. Because Black men during Jim Crow, or even during our current era, have been almost always under duress. So when you talk about having to recreate and reposition, I don't really know of a species that's had to do that more than the Black man in America just to make it. I talked about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, mm-hmm. and the rest the Welsing theory for color confrontation, or what she called the ISIS papers. I would encourage anybody that wants to understand at least what the Black experience is and what has a part of what might explain what has happened to the Black man, to read that book. That's for one. And right now I'm just looking at it from a secular standpoint because she's approached it from a secular standpoint. I would also tell people to read the Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys by Haki Madhubuti. In this country, there's been a specific, pernicious effort to disqualify and destroy Black men. And that work, because there's a fear of a Black planet, as Public Enemy has said before, and I've mentioned before, this is an issue not just in America, but for Black men all around the world. Just recently, I was thinking about or reading something on Patrice Lumumba, who was the leader of the Congo. He was summarily deposed, and now years later, the country that was responsible are trying to own up to it. But he was someone that the people of his country supported, but the tyrants, the colonialists who were responsible for attempting to run all of Africa, decided to put him down. And we see that all over the place. You take someone that's brilliant, and then I'm gonna make two more points, and then I'm gonna be quiet, because a lot of what the sister was saying is not couched in an understanding of the fear of white genetic annihilation. Now, is that true for every white person? Well, Dr. Welsing says that subconsciously, yes. Do I necessarily subscribe to that? No. But the people who are running these systems, they absolutely subscribe to it. The people who are running these systems, Willie Lynch and so on and so forth, absolutely. That is their mind. That is their mindset. You think of somebody like Johnny Cochran, one of the most brilliant men you would ever meet. What happened to him? Or Reginald Lewis, the first Black man to engineer a leveraged buyout over $1 billion. What happened to him? It's always something flimsy that or mysterious that happened to them. No, it's an agenda. It's an agenda. So when you understand that there's an agenda for the mass incarceration, that there's an agenda for the underemployment, then the sister would realize that instead of looking at Black men as unqualified, we should look at what has happened to undermine the strength of the Black man, and look at what is it that we need to do to partner as men and women to get where we need to be. But I mean, I can go on and on, but I'm gonna let you take the mic.
Okay, yeah. I don't believe she's really. I don't look at it in terms of Black men for this. I think it's just more men in general and the relationship to women in the current day. And for that, from a societal view, I do believe what she's saying is correct. I'm gonna let her finish, and then I'll kind of get more into my thoughts on it. So let me
Okay.
hold on, let me also put the volume back.
Stayed fixed. for such. Women, on the other hand, have been trained to be multifunctional, be workers, be mothers, be managers, be emotional caretakers. Men have always been monofunctional. So now that women have absorbed two roles, society has made men obsolete to the average woman. She can do all of her own domestic labor. If she can provide and protect for herself, if she can emotionally regulate herself, what can a man do for her? Men's inability to change and to shift the same way that women have been forced to change and shift is why the average woman does not need a man. You are not able to add value to her life because you are stuck in a role that has become obsolete. Women make money. That is the truth. There's no way around that in society. Society now requires women to work because of capitalism. Capitalism requires lots of bodies for the workforce. So there's no women leaving the workforce. There's no women stop doing domestic labor because everyone has to do domestic labor. If men are not willing, add some type of value to women's lives, to make women's lives easier. Why would a woman accept a man? Like really, please tell me. Because society has required women to become multifunctional. So where does that position men in the lives of these multifunctional women? Traditional masculinity is obsolete. If men do not grow emotionally, spiritually, domestically, then they really do not have a role in the lives of the average woman. There's no way around that. So the truth of the matter is that men have to look themselves in the mirror and decide collectively that they are going to change. Because there is no role for an obsolete position. Your position has become obsolete. You cannot do the bare minimum. You cannot show up doing the bare minimum, expect to have a role in the lives of the modern woman.
Okay, so now let me get to my point, because I believe it's more the way society has been pushing things for the past couple of, I'd say, decades, in terms of having women more independent. And I think this is kind of the result. Hold on, let me make sure everything is not doubling up. I think this is kind of the result of women reaching that level of independence. And that's what's also causing all of the issues within the dating market right now. So, because I do believe right now, we've talked about it before, I believe especially in the black community, women are outperforming men in the financial sector. I would say I know a lot more women who have high paying jobs than I know men having high paying jobs. So right there, that dynamic of what traditionally we look at as a man being a provider in a relationship is already changed. And moving forward, I don't really see that changing anytime soon. Now, where I see this coming to is I do believe that as women, they'll eventually reach a point where working no longer makes sense to them, because they no longer, like, once they have enough money for them to be independent, then there's no more that they need to necessarily strive for. So I think that's going to lead to the point where I want to say the economy will kind of be stagnated, just because I don't see what would motivate them to continue getting money. As for men, we've always had to get money if we wanted in order to attract a woman. So it's like, if women are not using their money in order to attract a mate, then it's like their motive. Eventually, if once they buy all the clothes and material things, and they feel secure enough, there's not gonna any longer be a motivation for them to pursue higher aspirations in terms of money getting. And I think that's the part where society as itself is going to kind of collapse because of this. Because although she's right, there is nothing more that a man can kind of provide to a modern woman. A lot of these women already have homes, like they already have their own place, their own car. So when it's not making any more sense for people to come together, and if they do, it's a lot of times women have to date down, which is traditionally not what they have been, or no one in our generation has necessarily been, I don't want to say trained, but kind of psychologically prepared for those types of roles. But on the same token, I don't think men are necessarily dying to be in a woman's life to take care of them anymore. So I think, like, from what she's saying that men are going to have to change, which I don't necessarily I don't believe that that's going to happen, and I don't think that women getting more money is going to force men to change. But unless men just learn to, fend for themselves, like men have to learn to cook for themselves, and in that sense, then they are, um, but then at that point, everyone's just living independently, and there is no more codependency between the sexes. And I think that's the biggest issue. Yeah, because women are now, they are completely autonomous and able to live independently, so they really don't need a man anymore. Just as much as a man doesn't need a woman, it's almost to the same capacity. I think back in the day when it used to be one income, a woman would almost have to apply for a marriage like they would apply for a job. But now that that job is um, taking the place of a provider, if they just have to go to their job now, you can't expect them to. It's like you can't serve two masters at that point. You can't have a job and a husband to the capacity of what, and a husband being in the capacity of what it used to be traditionally. And so what men are typically expecting from a woman is for her to, have the child, take care of the home. And now if she still has to go to work, now it's like, why would she sign up for two jobs now and not necessarily get anything else? So that's kind of my whole thought process on it. I don't see men really changing or having to adopt a new role. I mean, men who feel that they need that female companionship would probably um, try to, like, sacrifice. I could see it maybe happening more as men becoming more handy to, being able to provide different services for women on like an independent level. But I don't know how that necessarily works into it being an actual relationship now. So I think that this kind, like, the premise, I think, is true. How it's framed, it's a little like, I guess it's a little off-putting to men, but I can't say anything that she said was inaccurate necessarily.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think that what she shared is not based in history, especially as it pertains to black men. Now, what I will say is that of the two genders, the man, especially if we're talking about in the home, the man is the one that has to be the most flexible. And it's like a repeating cycle. I happen to I happen to have the opportunity to meet your father, so I know you were blessed to be fathered. But for a lot of young men who haven't had the opportunity to be fathered, and to the point that I was making earlier, it's intentional that so many black men aren't fathered. It's a repeating cycle. So generation after generation of this issue, you had Moynihan who made it public policy to pull the black man out of the home. And so, yeah, maybe her thesis is true for white America, but it's off for black America. Now, this idea that women don't need a man is a very dangerous myth. Yeah, you have a lot of women who are making loads and loads of, of money now, but it still doesn't satisfy the role, the God given role that a man would supply in her life. And so there's a particular space because first of all, if we go back to her original design, yeah, she has the ability to be flexible because she was designed that way. That's how Yahweh created her to be the helper to the man. So I think this is a very important conversation to have. And like I said at the outset, I applaud the sister for addressing something that's really important. But ultimately, her final thesis that women don't need men, that's misguided. It's very misguided. Just as misguided as the idea that men don't need women. Men need women, women need men.
Right. Now, I definitely believe we need each other. Don't get me wrong with that. But I do think, what do you think, or what would your definition of a good man be today in terms of what do you feel a man should provide in a relationship in the current day if it isn't monetary?
The number one problem, and I say this all the time, is a communication problem. So once we understand that, okay, there are forces. Now, if I look at it from purely secular, I already talked about those forces that work in our society, in our world, which is primarily white supremacy. And by the way, uh, institutional white supremacy also affects them as well, because the main people who benefit from that system are the elites, the ones who put that system together. I think the number one thing that men and women have to do is communicate from a position of knowledge. And once people understand what the game is, once men and women understand what the game is, then they can put their heads together and figure out how to win together. But usually, instead of us understanding what the game is and figuring out how we can complete each other, the system has designed things to cause us to compete with one another.
Right.
And so that's the reason why for a lot of people it's not working. It's a communication issue and an understanding issue.
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely believe it's been turned into a competition. It's hard for me to say what, because I look at that in a lot of just relationships that I've wouldn't say pursue, but just in the thoughts of like, okay, what could I provide to a woman who has a lot of what she already needs, like, and what could a woman provide to me for someone who, I have my place, I've been, cooking, cleaning for myself as well. Like, at what point are we intersecting now? In a dating market, like, what are we looking to build upon as a couple in today's society? Because now it's no longer, if both of you guys have a position or like an actual job, now what typically happens is you have to outsource all of the other responsibilities of the household. So now if we're both working, now you have to find someone to cook, or you have to pay to get food, uh, order food out, Uber Eats, whatever, whatever is most convenient in that situation, because now everyone has money. So what would typically be um, time spent preparing a meal is now going to be monetized. Before, instead of the man cutting the grass in order to save time, he's gonna outsource that to another, to someone who is like more equipped to do that. So now it's just, I think, since so many things within relationships have now been able to be turned into services, it's like we're losing the actual benefits of it being like back in the old days, like where somebody had to cook a full meal in order for you to eat. If you weren't gonna cook it, then it wasn't getting made at all. And if you weren't gonna cut the grass, there was nobody gonna come around to cut the grass. So I'm saying, with everything now being so, everything is able to be purchased now, it's hard to see the full benefits of a modern relationship. And on top of that, people feel like they're losing out on their freedom because they have social media and they're seeing what other people are doing. And so you're like, well, if I'm making this much, I should be able to go on this vacation. If I'm making this much, then we shouldn't have to worry about. And I think that's been, to me, I think that's more of the ideals of a lot of modern women today, in terms like they don't want to be limited in anything of their imagination. They want to go on a million vacations, and and they have the money to do that. So it's like you can't tell them that they can't. And but the only but as a husband, you might say, "No, I'm not. We're not gonna do all of that." So, but then in their case, they're literally like, "Well, I'd rather live the life that I want to live." So, I just think that that's why I'm like, it's an interesting conversation. I don't exactly know. Like I said, I don't know exactly what I would even be able to bring in order to negate that for many women who can afford that lifestyle. It's like, yeah, you want to take them, because I that's not something that I personally want to do. I don't want to go on a million vacations. To me, that's, I don't mind going on vacation, but that's not something that I'm, looking to spend my money on, or anything. So I just feel like, it's gonna take a lot more discussion in order to figure out how we can really benefit each other. I'm really starting to think it more as, it has to be like a business venture where we're, both able to, help each other in that capacity. I mean, love is
So,
always in the foundation, but
first of all, it's not one size fits all.
right.
That's number one. Uh, Now, my grandfather, he was a man's man. He was a macho man.
Mm,
However, he didn't he didn't fit the mold of the traditional family mold, because, as the story was told to me, he was the one who taught my grandmother how to cook. Now, during that generation, the woman wrote. Now, eventually, she became the boss in that arena, but it didn't start off that way.
mm,
And so that was a couple that realized, okay, X needs to be done. I'm the one that's better at it. And so I think that part of what we have to do is reevaluate what true wealth is. Now, cash, dollars, gold, that's only part of wealth.
mm,
Some people, we learned that a very famous tech guy, multi-billionaire, but then his health got challenged, and all of that financial wealth, it became worthless to him. And so there are different aspects to well-being than just finance, and the world has sold us on materialism. And my point is that two individuals have to sit down and discuss what their needs are, and once they discover what their needs are and discuss those needs, then they figure out whether they can move forward together. Because one woman might say, hey, I need a guy who can take these trips with me. But, one of for me, at the end of the day, one of the most potent lines that I've heard in the movie was that success means nothing unless you have someone you love that you can share it with. So even if you go back to some of the conversations that our brother was having a few years ago, and he was getting real popular talking about high value men and high value women and all that kind of stuff, really high value men, even a guy who's falling out of control. At the end of the day, if he's consuming all of that on himself, the book that I read calls that selfishness. And people who consume everything on themselves, and they feel like they don't need anybody because they got it themselves. I've never met a person like that that is authentically happy on a real surface level, maybe, but no, not authentically happy.
Yeah,
So I think.
yeah, nah, I agree. I think when you're looking at it from how she was describing from a capitalistic standpoint, there is no relationships don't work, but it has to be more than just the monetization or physical things that you get. Like you need that love or you need that person to share those accomplishments with. And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen or how that things are gonna maybe kind of balance out in the future. But right now I do believe this is the direction a lot of people's mentality is going to take them, and I think we have to get over that hump as a community to before we can kind of get back to an equilibrium of people have begin to have the conversation of what we're really bringing to the table. Like people talk about what are women bringing to the table, what men bringing to the table. We need a whole new furniture set at this point. So so we need a new house. Forget the table. We need new homes. Whatever. So I think yeah, we're gonna see a very big reset. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. I think a lot of women share this sentiment right now. Like I said, I see it just in terms of the way the economy is going, especially with women being enrolled in the black community, especially more women being educated. I just see it taking. They're about to blow men out the water when it comes to the financial aspect. So that's also why I wanted men to start to think about what else do you have that's valid, or what else valuable do you have. And there's a lot of things that we do have value, but it's also going to take some. You may have to not be the breadwinner, and I think so many people grew up thinking that was going to have to be the mentality, or that's what they needed in order to actually secure a woman that they love or they want. And so now it may be something different. So just be on the lookout for that. Make sure that you're educating yourself, because it's not just all book smarts. You need to have some street smarts that'll help you in some situations. Know your finances. Be able to management is something big that a lot of women may need as well. So
And we have to redefine, and I like what you said, you might need a whole new furniture set. We have to, we may have to redefine what provider looks like.
right.
We may have to redefine what provider looks like, because again, the very thing that we've been told that this gender is supposed to provide, but then what if he's providing B, C, and D, and you're providing A, and you providing A, is allowing the two of you to be great. Then you provide, she provide A, you let them provide B, C, and D. But again, the two of them have to have a conversation about what their needs are and understand what their place is in the world. And the reason why I focused on talking about Black people, because as Black people, we've got a unique position in the world. That's why people like Dr. King, Malcolm X, uh, Apostle Farrakhan have given their whole life to this conversation because we've got a unique position in the world because of this pernicious attack that has been placed. Now, ultimately, if we take it to church, it's devilish. But if we look at it from a secular standpoint, the term that we will mostly use when it comes to Black people is this ungrounded fear that, hey, we don't want to disappear, so we're going to do everything possible to harass these people, and it starts with the Black man. It starts with the Black man. So anyway, this conversation is one that we need to have again, and have um, sisters involved in the conversation on the actual podcast, and
For
we
sure.
need to have it over and over and over again. You
For sure. And there's one last thing. I guess it's just a model that people can kind of think of moving forward because we have to be able to adapt to the times. Right now, in a lot of these relationships, if you're in a relationship and the woman is the breadwinner, I believe the best structure for a marriage would be one W-2 earner and another person who's kind of going after a entrepreneurial route. And I believe this is the best because with the W-2 you should be able to get health insurance for the both of you if you're married, have stable income, and then the other person should have time to really focus on actually building a successful entrepreneurial business, hopefully to the point to where you no longer need the W-2 employment. So that's just one thing I wanted to leave people with in terms of how you may want to think of the structure. So yeah, maybe you're a young man and you don't have and a girl who has a very well paying job. That's when marriage, that's when you have to play the game of America, and that's where marriage can be a very huge benefit because now you can get on each other's health insurance. You have the opportunity to build something that you truly believe in, dedicate your whole time to it, help allocate the funds, or you're filling in the gaps. If you're not making money initially, you should be making something. But if you're in that situation, that's just an option. Or the other way around, if you're a W-2 employee and you're making really good money and you find a ambitious woman who's an entrepreneur, it works both ways. So just make sure that your team up makes sense. I don't necessarily think I think right now though the W-2 employees I think leads to a lot of openness, or I think that leads to a lot of issues in today's society because you're both required to work 40 hours a week, and that doesn't leave much for home improvement or things to be taken care of domestically. And it's unfair. I mean, you could split the work, but I think that's where things get messy. So that was my last 2 cents about that.
And let me say this, and that was a very good point. I don't want people to get confused because I'm pretty sure most people will walk away saying that I defended men, particularly Black men, and that would probably be true. But at the same time, obviously, I'm not talking about those guys who aren't trying to do their part. I'm not talking about those guys who have decided to stay at home, get low, play video games all day. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about men who understand that there are forces against them, but they're trying to they're doing their darndest to try to figure it out. And with all of the tools and the technology that exists today, there's a way. You know, you got a cell phone. Just about everybody in America has a cell phone. Every guy in America has a cell phone. Then you can, if you have to stay up 24 hours watching YouTube videos, then do it. But you know, don't any guy get it twisted. If you are not putting in your effort to play your part, then how can you expect to get any respect? Now, it may take a while for you for what you're attempting to do to materialize, but every day you should be getting up trying to get it, trying to. Because I remember Dre, you shared when you were in between gigs that you treated getting your next gig like your gig.
Full-time job. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So this idea that, oh, it's not working for me, and you know, the white man got his foot on my neck. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about a cop out. That's not what this is. This is about you trying every possible way to support, especially if you have children, to support your children. You trying to turn over every brick and every rock, and sometimes that takes time. But you're constantly trying. You're trying, and you're communicating with that person who you're in partnership with. That's what I'm talking about.
For sure. All right, Sean. Well, we were trying to. This was an important conversation, so we went over our time a little bit, but we do that for good discussion. So thank everyone for tuning in today. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how you feel. How's your relationship going? How are you and your spouse or partner handling these times in the economy, just in general? Um, have any advice for people who are looking in the dating market, or anybody who's married, how they are navigating with the changing of roles and things of that nature? Please share it in the comments as well. So thank you guys so much. Anything else you wanted, Frank?
No, this was a good conversation, and like we always say, like and share. And by the way, I do want to say one more thing, because it's very important for people to take the time to share their perspective. And so there are people who you have a perspective, and you've been thinking about getting your perspective out, whether it be a book or a podcast, and go for it. Because again, if you've got something important to say, we need to hear it so we can we can move the conversation along. But you sitting on your light, you're not helping the plight.
I'm not sure. Let your voice be heard. That's the only thing we can do. So,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next time. Peace.